Well, if we look at the view here, you can see this hill here. We're on short grassland with a lot of limestone around as well. And this is a Coombe Valley road, just to, well, not far from Broadmain. And on this hill, hopefully this camera will pick up, you've got some bright green grass. That's tall grass. And on the left over here, you've got this big pale splotch here. That's creeping thistle. That's an invasive species. As is tall grass, under the right circumstances. And the little tiny bits of yellow that you might be able to see are ragwort. I'll talk more about all those in a minute. Invasive is a term which you come across quite a lot in ecology. It applies to various different species and especially to plants. Invasive often crops up in the context of introduced species which come in without all their co-evolved species, their checks and balances, and they can take over, in inverted commas, an area because they basically find a niche which is more open to them than the niches they occupy in their native areas. But as well as non-natives, native species can become invasive in the right circumstances. And here you can see at least two in this view which are invasive. And the first one is ragwort. A couple of weeks ago this whole area here was bright yellow with ragwort, just going over peak flowering now, starting to set seed, and in another week's time it'll be setting seeds and the seeds will be drifting up the valley here. This area is horse paddocks and various other incidental uses. People camp up here on the weekends. Basically they've bought it or leased it and they have barbecues, and they use these shepherd's huts, the two of them, and the tent, and they graze ponies which are down there out of sight, and goats. There are two up there. So this is intensively grazed but not intensively managed. And you can see the horses have got a bit hungry, and up here on the boundary they've leant over and they're eating the grass into next door's field, which is a different holding, and has at the moment fallen out of management. And you can see this has got long grass, very, very dense, and up there you have more ragwort. So not a lot. Ragwort there is at a fairly low density, not in a state where you could say it's become invasive. But with ragwort, like other species, some's good, more isn't necessarily better. But what's happened here, the circumstances are right for ragwort to become invasive. They're in an area which is being grazed extremely hard, not intensively managed, and the horse grazing has eaten the sward right the way down and has opened it up, so that ragwort seeds and other seeds of wind-dispersed species can come in, they can germinate, they can establish, and they can grow. Horses keep grazing. Horses will avoid live ragwort because it's noxious to them, unpalatable. They won't eat it, which is just as well, because it can be toxic, not just to horses but other species as well. So, invasive. While we're looking at this view, ragwort isn't the only potentially invasive species in it. Zoom in. Right in the middle, you'll see an area of nettles, and just to the left there, that reddish brown stuff, that's greater dock. Both those species can take over quite large areas. And if you look down here, you'll see what's happening in this field. So in spite of the fact that the ragwort can't really come in here because the sward is very tall, very dense, hasn't been cut for a long time, so there's quite a thatch in here. The nettle, which I'm focusing on at the moment, runs in a swathe along here. He's doing quite well because it grows pretty tall and it spreads by rhizomes. So an original plant came in here, started growing, and it's cloning itself. It's competing quite well with the tall grass. So nettle can become invasive. And what you can't see from here, but you can see down here, is a lot of that grass is a grass called tallgrass. Brachypodium sylvaticum. And on chalk grassland, which is where we are now, because we're on limestone and with a bit of chalk, it can become invasive as well. So this is it here, and it's mixed in with Yorkshire fog, which is this one, all seeding and going slightly over. So tall grass can actually take over, grow tall. It's relatively unpalatable if you're grazing. Cattle will eat it if you push them hard. Sheep, yeah, won't really touch it. And horses will eat it, again, if you push them hard. But when you're doing conservation grazing, do you actually push your stock hard? And you can see here, I've got a patch of sward with finer leaf grasses like Yorkshire fog. Then you've got the tall grass over here and coming down here. In the spring, it shows up quite bright green, and you can see a bit here. And it starts as a small plant and then forms quite large clones, and you can see it all across this slope, this hill fort. So, invasive. It's an important ecological term, shouldn't be discounted. Native species can become invasive under the right circumstances, as well as non-native introduced species. Right, rather nice red admiral. See, now he's folded his wings. He was suddenly camouflaged. I think that's one of the species whose caterpillars eat stinging nettle. I'll have to look that up when I get back. But if we look over the back here, see an area of this pasture that hasn't been topped. This has all been topped, all this area here, topped, and I think it's been harrowed. Topped to reduce the density of coverage of the nettles, but it hasn't nearly got rid of it. So the red admiral is quite safe. There's plenty of food. But over the background, this area hasn't been topped, and it's totally covered by creeping thistle. Let's see. Used to this camera yet. This is zooming out. Anyway, so that's totally covered by creeping thistle, and you can see where the sheep are. They're not in there. Why would they be in there? All the food is over here. And you see another great big area. Creeping thistle over there. So in the circumstances we have here, creeping thistle has become invasive, and it's got potential to invade other areas, because you can see by the colour of this, and the colour of this area over here, it's going to produce a lot of seed this year, and if it goes with the prevailing wind, it's going to go over that way and potentially colonise other fields. And you can see here all the fodder crops have been cut on these fields over here. So what's going to happen if that all turns to creeping thistle, ragwort and other species?